already Staten Island. It's time to celebrate 5 years of Ferry Hawks baseball. Come out to the ballpark this week as the Ferry Hawks welcome in the Charleston Dirty Birds May 5th through the 10th. Grab the kids and come on out. We kick it off on Tuesday, May 5th with Cinco de Baseball with $5 tickets and $5 food and beverage specials. And we end the week as we celebrate all moms on Mother's Day. Moms get in free. Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.
The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right. Shut that guy up. He comes on every week before we do, and starts yelling and instigating fighting between the hosts on this show. We don't need him to have a fight. We have fights all the time. And our co-host is none other than Jake Novak, and he is on a roll right now because more and more the issue of redistricting and how the district lines are drawn and what are the parameters whereby a district is acceptable and where it's not. So please let me introduce my co-host with his thoughts for the day, Jake Novak.
Well, my thought for the day has been my thought for the last 50 years, and that is no one listens to me. That's for sure, because as you know, Governor, last week on this program, I was excoriating my colleagues, not only in the journalism world, but in the political world, to embrace the Supreme Court decision, knocking down race as a possible criterion for districting, creating districts, because I really felt like these gerrymandered racial districts where 90% of the black people in this country live in were basically economic no-go zones. And I really still feel, the week hasn't changed my mind, I still feel that if these districts are properly redrawn, this will be the most economically liberating thing for black people in this country since the Emancipation Proclamation. That's how bad it's been for them in these districts where they have leaders who have literally no incentive to do right by them. And it shows. And all of a sudden, black people overnight could go from a forgotten part of the electorate, a taken for granted part of the electorate, to swing voters. And there's nothing better than being a swing voter. That's when you get the attention.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely right. So last week, I was really moved by what you said and have given it some thought. And as we look through this week, there was some redistricting in Virginia that got thrown out.
Yeah.
There was some redistricting in Tennessee that got thrown out. And then there was a situation a couple of days ago where in Alabama, they only had one majority-minority district, but they cut it in 4 pieces. And maybe that might be the area where the new economic development begins. Because they really sliced this district up. And if you thought that it was racially motivated, you could think that. But just in this period of time, I just think that it's been advantageous for particularly the Republicans to cut up as many districts as they can, because the future is not really clear how it's going to go. So I understand why they did it, but it was a little shocking.
Well, I mean, the biggest part of my frustration is that, look, I expect the Democrats to push back on this. I expected them to call it racist and evil. I think it's particularly wicked of them to do so because, again, this is really liberating people that they have kept in economic arrears for a long time. But the Republicans aren't doing much better, in my opinion. They're only talking about this in terms of how many new seats in the House they're going to get. And that's fine. That they can talk about in their private strategy session. My friend Scott Rasmussen.
Exactly,
yeah.
but publicly
they're talking about that, which they shouldn't. It makes you look
so politically naive, and it really ruins the whole sense of what our voting process is and why we vote.
Yeah, they should keep these numbers games to themselves. My friend Scott Rasmussen at Paterson Research, again, came out with yet another poll showing that the average voter just doesn't care about all of these numbers, doesn't care about the reapportionment part, but they will care if they are given the message that I'm again pounding on the table. This could be a real economic liberation for millions of Americans who have been kept out of the party for a long time. And have been told to accept a particular party's rule no matter what. And that includes, for example, in this Tennessee district, which just got erased, thankfully, a white guy was their representative. He was a Democrat, but he wasn't even. So this idea that, we're not going to get enough black people in the Congress if we get rid of these districts. And not only was a white guy representing them for many years, but he kept defeating a black woman Republican who kept running against him. I mean, the whole thing is nonsense.
How about that?
And I just think people need to understand that this is exciting. And the third group that I want to excoriate is my fellow news media professionals. Look, I don't care where you sit. I don't care if it's MS Now or Fox News. This is a huge story. We're in the business of getting people's attention. Some people call it sensationalism. There's nothing sensationalist about saying what I've said before. This could be a tremendously economic positive for so many people. And this should be... and if MSN now wants to debate that and push back and say some people like Jake Novak say, fine, but it's still getting the attention. Instead, they're not even covering this story really, other than, hey, look at these people yelling in the Tennessee State House, rent to rioters. Who cares? This is much bigger, and it's a good example of how this business, this news business, this media business, for all of its sins, I can't stand it when they don't take advantage of something that could get people excited. I'm in the business of exciting
You are really the only person I know who has brought this issue up. I've heard people bring it up because they heard you say it and then said it to me. So I just have to ask you, where did you come up with this idea? Because remember last week, I was all ready to debate you on it, but when you laid it out, I was like, for once I'm going to be an honest person and accept it. Because it is a very interesting concept of how voting may change because of these new imposed rules by the Supreme Court.
Well, this idea comes from a lot of years and a lot of, I could say simply education, but also tradition. To really strip it down, I believe in natural law. I believe in the natural law of human rights and human dignity. And at the end of the day, nothing that I want to talk about politically or culturally matters unless it fits into that paradigm. And I'm not getting involved in anything that denigrates those things. So when I see that there's nothing particularly wrong with black people. So why are they continually the last rung on the ladder, or the lowest rung on the ladder economically? And it's because of these constructs, like these gerrymandered districts and their leaders who don't want to do right by them. And the overall Democrat Party in this case, and there was times when was other entities who were fine with trading off. The systematic racism against black people in this country exists on two fronts. On the education front, where the Democrat Party has decided that it's okay to allow millions of black children, generation after generation, to get subpar public education in favor of the teachers' unions' votes and money. And the same has been true. Now, a lot of people are aware of that one. They haven't been aware of the other one, which is similar. They are willing to let millions and millions of black people live in economic squalor in return for a guaranteed number of Democrat elected leaders from those congressional districts, and in some cases, state Senate districts or state representative districts, that kind of thing.
And it's probably, Jake, why not too many black people who lived in those areas, why it took so long to elect black Congress members, U.S. senators, and then inevitably the first black president of the United States. And part of it was that it was perceived that it was advantageous to live in those types of conditions when it actually was working counterintuitively to the way people would have wanted it to.
Yeah, they liked it that way. Remember, 15 years ago, Eric Holder said we need to have a conversation about race and racism in this country. And I was very eager to do so. I wish we had a conversation. Now, I think he really wanted to do a harangue, a soliloquy, and a monologue. I don't think he wanted to have a conversation. But that would have been my conversation. That would have been my contribution. Now, someone might say, well, you're not a black person, Jake, and it doesn't really matter what, you really shouldn't be participating in the conversation. But that's the whole point. If you want to talk about the way that we look at each other from racial lines or skin color lines, then you've got to hear both sides. And me as a non-black person, this is what I would say. This is the racism that I see in our country. I see the racism in this public education system, and I see the racism in these gerrymandered districts. And I think these two things are the biggest, massive problem. And, last week, you may have noticed, I very much refrain from, and I will continue to do so, refrain from using slave era terminology. I'm not going to say the word master or slave or plantation. And I said not only because that's triggering rhetoric, but more importantly, because it's not really accurate to this situation with these districts. It's much more like feudalism. And feudalism, for those of you who didn't learn it in school, I urge you to read up on it. Here's the Cliff Notes version. Feudalism stinks, okay? It stinks. It's basically where you have a lord, not elected, who owned not only the land from an economic standpoint, but also had the political power. And it was like working at the company store. You worked for the Lord, and he also owned the store. So you paid, it's like the old coal mining song by Tennessee Ernie Ford. The coal miners in this country in the late 19th and early 20th century worked for the coal mine. They lived in these coal towns. The shops were owned by the coal company. And they were constantly in debt.
I owe my soul to the company store.
That's right, because there was, and that's what feudalism is like. So we had the situation with this state senator in Virginia who had her offices raided by the FBI earlier, during the week. And we don't know all the charges yet, all the specifics yet, but they also raided the pot dispensary building, which is the biggest in her district and really the only one, which she also happens to own. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. She happens to be she's the most powerful person in the Virginia State Senate, which has been voting increasingly for legalizing pot and opening these dispensaries. And she just happens to be one of the owners. Wow. What a shocker. I wonder how many other new businesses have been opened in this district. Oh, and by the way, that's another thing, Governor. We can't get fracking. We can't get good manufacturing jobs. But gambling and free and legalized pot, the cynicism and the low esteem that our politicians have for the people who live in these districts, and then really a lot of other districts too, is off the charts. You don't need fracking. You don't need a manufacturer. We're going to keep the regulations high. Forget about building gas stoves. Oh, but you want to gamble? You want a little pot? Sure. This is really, that's viciously racist and cynical, and I'm sick of it.
Well, it is, it really is a kind of a breaking point for a lot of people these days, because we're really not addressing the issues that are the most important. And as you did point out, these kind of side distractions seem to get a lot of public attention. And where do we wind up? We wind up really not going anywhere. Do you think that this kind of rhetoric and back and forth and these differences of opinion and that kind of thing, are they going to have any impact on the midterm elections?
Well, it does seem like there are going to be a number of states that will maximize their Republican representation. It's not going to be, listen, some of these purple and blue states are going to drag their feet on following this Supreme Court decision. Remember, reminding me of Brown versus Board of Education, where there were a number of states that dragged their feet for many years on that decision, most notably Virginia, which just shut down all their public schools. I think there was one other state that did that too. They just shut them all down for a couple of years, which was, by the way, a huge shot in the arm to all the private schools in the state of Virginia.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Suddenly everyone had to go to private school. So they're going to drag their feet. But the red states, as we've already seen, have snapped into action. And it feels, that numbers game, I understand that it's important. I'm not saying that it's not important to talk about these numbers. I just think that if the Republicans understood messaging better and understood really a bigger picture, they would instead say what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks, which is it was a Republican president who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and it is a Republican president who is going to now implement the Supreme Court's righteous decision to break down these racially gerrymandered economic no-go zones that have left generations of black people in abject poverty. Now, that's the message they should be saying. But, again, as I've said to you, Governor, I have an alter ego, and my alter ego is Jake Novak, unemployable political consultant. And the reason why I'm unemployable is because I give good advice. To be a successful political consultant in this country, you need to give bad advice, divisive advice, harmful advice, and I'm unfortunately not skilled in those things.
Well, it's interesting because, whenever you hear the consultants and representatives of elected officials and others, it's almost as if they gain a certain type of reputation because one of their candidates surprised, the public and won, where they were thought to lose. Now, the consultant really gets more out of it than the candidate, because now the consultant can go around and sell that to other candidates about how they can make them win as well, and inevitably it catches up with them.
And have you noticed that some of the biggest, successful gurus, particularly of presidential campaigns, seem to only have one shot in their chamber? First it was James Carville. He never was a part of a successful presidential campaign after the '92 Clinton thing. Karl Rove with Bush, David Axelrod. It feels like these guys have one shot in their chamber because they catch a particular wave at a particular time, and I believe that they don't have that bigger picture vision. I've never heard a David Axelrod, James Carville, or Karl Rove speech where I really thought wow, this guy has a great vision for the future of America. He's got a bigger picture ethic. He believes in no, it's all been well, we can get the state and that thing. And we, it's just small-minded people. And there's never been a more powerful position politically in the history of the world than the presidency of the United States. And these small-minded guys are the ones who ferry these people into office.
Well, Jake, I'm impressed. You're an equal opportunity abuser.
Oh, yeah.
You got Karl Rove in there. Yeah. You got James Carville in there. And, David Axelrod. And that's inevitably what happens. Many of these consultants, they play the hot hand. Right. In other words, if people voted a certain way in Indiana a little differently than they should have, then we can say the same thing to people in Oklahoma. But it doesn't mean the same thing to them, which is why a lot of times that kind of advice or that kind of assistance fails.
Yeah. Carville was a hot hand. That's a great example. If you remember, Senator Hines from Pennsylvania had a plane crash and died. And they had a special senatorial election in Pennsylvania. And Carville was working with this guy, Harris Wofford, who won in the special election. And that was a wave that he was riding, and that's how he got in with the Clintons. And I happen to think that Bill Clinton was a fantastic campaigner. He had one Achilles heel going into 1992 is that he gave really, really long speeches. He only shortened his speeches slightly as president, but he did shorten them. But it was clear this was a guy who liked getting out there and glad-handing the people, being with the people. I don't think we've seen much like that since. I didn't buy it from Obama. I think President Trump likes speaking in front of large crowds and actually enjoys that. But I don't think anyone really enjoyed the actual face-to-face campaigning in my lifetime like Bill Clinton did. And so I don't know how much James Carville really played the role.
I heard Clinton speak at the 1988 Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, they had to shove him off.
They finally got him off around midway through 1999. And I remembered saying to the group I was with, you will never see that man again. He is an idiot. Boy, did I live to... to eat those words. And now I have to eat those words. But I actually... told Hillary Clinton that I had said that once, and she got a real kick out of that. But that was, I think that that whole situation was the transformation of bringing ideas and bringing information to the public. That by 1992. I think every candidate that was running for president had a stopwatch because they knew they couldn't repeat the Clinton thing lived in infamy.
Yeah.
But do you think that that in this era there could be some kind of a breakthrough? I mean, I just get the impression that you hear about all these people who might be running for president, and you just wonder, are they going to just follow the old pattern, or are they going to take advantage of what President Trump did, which is find something that people haven't done before and go out and do it? Now, before you get to answer that, we want to take a little time out and let our sponsors be heard, and then we'll come back here on The Left versus the Right. I'm David Paterson, and I'm here with Jake Novak, and we are just having a ball, and we hope you'll be here when we get back.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Left versus the Right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back with the one and only Jake Novak, and he has been bouncing out of his chair, wanting to share some information with us, and so I'm not even going to take one more second of anybody's time. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, we went to the break with this question of what will it take, who will ride the next wave, and what kind of wave will it be to become president of the United States next time around. It's, by the way, very much up in the air. And I want to repeat something that I've said many times first before I talk about this, which is, if you're thinking about who a front runner is or want to be the front runner now, don't. This is not when you want to be the front runner.
Right, exactly.
You don't want to be the front runner until a few months before, maybe not more than 2 months before the convention. So, because the earlier you're the front runner, the less chance you'll remain the front runner. It doesn't work that way. Someone might find some old examples before TV or certainly before the internet where that wasn't the case. But right now, it's this strange inverse relationship. The longer the election cycle is, in other words, the more time you have to spend raising money and the more time you need to spend creating an organization if you want to run for president, which now is a 4-year cycle now. I mean, there seems to be no break. As that gets longer, it's shorter the amount of time that you want to be in that major spotlight. So that's an interesting dichotomy. Again, look what's going on with Gavin Newsom, whose stock has dropped, I think, in the last few months, as the person people really thought was the presumptive front runner for the Democrats. I don't think that they have a front runner yet. At the same time, Governor, I'm very skeptical that the Democrats will have an actual real primary for president. I don't think they've had one since 2008. I don't blame them for not having one in 2012 because they had an incumbent president. Of course, that's not really a stain on them. But they certainly didn't allow for a truly open primary in 2016. They tried it for the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary in 2020. And then when their chosen guy, Biden, was trounced in both, they suddenly forced everyone else out. They got Jim Clyburn to come out and say basically everyone else who is racist if you're not going to go with Biden. And that was the end of that. So I don't think they're going to actually have an open primary. And we know what happened in 2024. They just removed Biden. So that said, I don't think they've chosen. But on the other hand, I also don't think that they've chosen who they're going to ram in there and not let you vote against.
It's interesting the role he played in 3 separate cycles, 16, 20, and 24. And it just seemed as if it went bad to worse, because if he got pulled in 2024 after or it was really right before the convention, right?
Yeah.
That he got pulled. Well, then if he got pulled right before the convention, he should never have gotten out of January.
Right.
Somebody should have stopped it, and a reasonable candidate could run and have the energy and the foresight to make it a race. And he, then the whole thing of, now the new candidate is trying to run against Trump, and that was just a mismatch.
They had all these great off-ramps, too. First of all, he was certainly no spring chicken. They could have always said at any time he's really strong now, but he's worried that he's not going to be able to maintain this high level of greatness of his health if he runs again. They could have used that off-ramp. After they lost the 2022 midterms, they could have done the same thing. They could have said,
that really would have been the time to do it.
Right. They didn't lose the Senate, but they lost the House, and they could have said, you know what? We're listening to the people. We're listening to the people, and we know you want to change. And they could have done something like that. They had a lot of easier off ramps, and they didn't use them. And then they were burned by it. I really had no doubt that Trump was going to win. Certainly after Biden pulled out. I mean, that was really not a doubt for me. And I pretty much felt also after he survived the assassination attempt in Butler, that was also to me a pretty clear moment. But anyway, I think the Democrats, though, interestingly enough, though, I mean, if you're interested in intrigue, I don't think that they've come up with their new Joe Biden or Kamala Harris to shove down our throats yet. I don't think they have. If they have, they're hiding it pretty well. I think that they're looking at Newsom right now, and they're not liking as much as what they saw. They may be smart enough to know that just hating Trump and just annoying Trump
doesn't make you a winner. And
it may not work in 2028 when Trump's not running. I know that Trump's joking about running again or maybe making a legal challenge for another term. I think that that's all about making sure that his fellow Republicans don't treat him like a lame duck, and it's been working quite well. So I don't think he's serious about that.
The longer that he hints or people around him suggest that maybe he would like to try to challenge the two-term limit, keeps everybody in line.
Yeah.
Anybody jumps out and says, he shouldn't be running for a third term, they won't get to a third turn back to their house or apartment, wherever they live, because he's done very well with it. And he doesn't even say it. You just, like, he'll say things like, well, then maybe we'll do it down the road. Maybe we'll do it next year. Maybe we'll do it next year. How do you know that you're going to be part of us? But he does it to plant the thought in your mind that he's going to stick around. But what it's really doing is it is molding the type of opposition that a Democratic candidate would have unless he was running again.
That's right.
Then it would be a little different. But it's actually masterful, that he does that. I was thinking the other day that there have been 3 attempts on his life in 3.5 years. And this is in his, in his second term. I am just wondering, is that going to become kind of just the understanding that when you elect a president, that there are going to be attempts on his or her life? It's just kind of shocking, because I think we had 4 presidents killed from the beginning of the just when we began as a country, but that amount of vigilance right now is disturbing.
Well, it's going to become the norm if we don't reform the Secret Service, which has just really lost a lot of its effectiveness and has become a bureaucratic nightmare. And that's again, my simple answer is to move it back to the Treasury, which is a much tighter ship than the Department of Homeland Security. That would be a simple answer for me. It should go right back to the way it was. And we have an administration that likes reverting to old stuff. I mean, we have it now, the Department of War again. Why not have the Secret Service go back to the Treasury Department? But, speaking again about 2028, we got a lot of chatter this week about Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio he's gone from being one of the least liked Republicans among the MAGA Republicans to one of the top, based on how well he's worked with Trump in this administration. This week he filled in one day, and the whole joke, all these memes of Marco Rubio being given every job in the world right now, including now he's going to have to be the Mets manager, or he's going to have to take over for,
actually,
for Mike Vrabel.
We don't want to make him the Mets manager.
Yeah, I know.
We want him to be able to run.
Right. None of these kinds of things. And then this week he filled in for Caroline Levitt at the White House press brief and did a great job there. But again, his major problem right now is what I said before. He doesn't want to be perceived as a front runner right now. He's not even saying he's running right now. I think that's really smart. But if he keeps getting thrust into the spotlight like this, usually the Republican candidate who Democrats say that they would most be able to swallow is usually the worst choice. Whether it's a Jeb Bush type or something like that. In his case, though, I have heard a lot of Democrats say that Rubio is someone that they could get behind, or at least not get behind, but they wouldn't go crazy. They wouldn't go crazy with anger over. And as he continues to get traction among people in the MAGA world, you got to consider him as a strong possibility. And it feels like J.D. Vance's stock, again, we don't know if either one of these guys are actually running. It does feel like his stock has dropped, but who knows? Who knows? And it could also be someone who emerges from these midterms. If you get someone who very dynamic, who wins a governor's race or something like that, you never know. Although I do think it's a little too short a window for them. But we'll see. The point is, the speculation about this doesn't go as long as it would in a normal presidential cycle. We would be talking about this a lot more with a lot more names, Governor, if it weren't for the fact that Trump is doing a very good job of dissuading his fellow Republicans from jumping, throwing their hats in the ring. And I think that's really smart. You don't want to be a lame duck president. He's going to be a lame duck president for that last year. So why not wait until then and not start the conversation now?
Right, exactly. Now, I've always had, Jake, a favorite Republican. In other words, like, it's the other party, but I like the way the person communicates. They seem to be a decent individual, that kind of thing. And so Peter King, I was always a big fan of his when he was in Congress. And, just John Lindsay, when he was mayor, he started, when he was first mayor, he was a Republican.
That's right.
He wound up being a Democrat. But I've always had these, sort of like favorite Republican types. And right now, one of them would be, as you suggested, Marco Rubio. Because first of all, he doesn't seem to do anything wrong. Every time somebody else does something wrong, they send him in to fix it. Mm-hmm. And, he has gone from, little Marco to a big problem for anybody who thinks they're going to run against him, even if he isn't saying anything right now.
Yeah, and he's out, he's outpacing everyone else in the cabinet, many of whom have had some of their troubles with their communication abilities. Including J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance has been very good. I felt like early in the Trump presidency this term, he was a great Sunday morning guest and was really working that bully pulpit that the vice president is supposed to, man. And I think he did that. And then I think he started to lose it a little bit. I haven't had any problem at all with his performance as vice president. I just don't see him as strong as a candidate as I thought he was. But again, that might all change. The thing is that, again, this reminds me also of how different cabinet positions have different values. There was a strong discussion towards the end of Eisenhower's first term to dump Nixon. Now, this is a story that gets floated every time. Every time a president is running for re-election, somebody floats he's going to change his vice president thing. Right. And the only time that turned out to be true was twice under FDR. FDR ended up not going with his original vice president for the third term because he was thinking about running for president himself. Why am I blanking on?
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, well, I know that his second vice president was Henry Wallace, and his third, of course, was Harry Truman.
Right.
Oh my God, this is very embarrassing that I'm forgetting the name. Oh, John Nance Garner. So John Garner was vice president under Roosevelt the first two terms.
I took a course at Columbia, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal.
Yeah.
How do I not remember his name?
Yeah, so John Nance Garner from Texas, and he spent all of 1939 preparing to run for president, only to have Roosevelt decide that he was going to, and then they had a personal break. They couldn't continue to work together. Henry Wallace turned out to be very much too sympathetic to communism and too friendly with then Soviet Russia. He was a real hot potato by 1944. They had to dump him, and they dumped him for Harry Truman. Henry Wallace, and this is a book.
They tried to come back.
Yeah. I'll tell you something. Henry Wallace is one chapter in a book that I'd really like to write about something that doesn't happen these days, Governor, which is political repentance. There are 4 or 5 figures in either my lifetime or just before my lifetime of people who actually were political figures, made a terrible error, and actually not only, maybe they didn't publicly apologize for it, but in their actions clearly changed course. So one of them is Neville Chamberlain, who famously fell for Hitler's deal, and everything else like that. And even after he was forced out as prime minister in the early days of Churchill taking over, was being a little bit of a meddler. But as soon as Great Britain was fully into the war with Nazi Germany, Neville Chamberlain he died of cancer not long after. He spent that last year of his life very much working for the war effort. Totally forgotten chapter in this man. I give him a lot of credit. Henry Wallace came to a realization that the Soviets were completely evil, that communism was stupid, and he spent a tremendous amount of his later years working to promote that. And
he ran for president in 1948.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out. 20 years later, another Wallace ran for president in 1968, and he didn't do too much better himself.
So there are a couple of people, I would say that there were a couple of others. There's a couple of other people like that who. Stephen Douglas from the Civil War era. Stephen Douglas, who ran against Lincoln in the great debates and defeated him in the Illinois Senate race. Fort Sumter happens, and the Confederates come to Stephen Douglas, and they kind of want to give him the presidency of the Confederacy. Governor, not only did he not accept the presidency of the Confederacy,
he sought the president of the United States.
He went to Lincoln and had a meeting with him after Fort Sumter, and he said, Abe, how many troops are you thinking about putting together to fight this insurgency, this Confederacy? And Lincoln's like, well, I don't know, 200,000. Douglas like, no, you need 500,000. And Stephen Douglas was a tremendous supporter of the Union efforts against the Confederacy in the Civil War. These are forgotten chapters. People can repent. I don't think that they're allowed to anymore because of political consultants, by the way, who tell you never to say you're sorry or that you ever made a mistake. So it's a book. I think I'll float it as an editorial column first and see how it's received, and then maybe write the book.
Well, we're going to let the public consider what you've just said for a couple of minutes as we have some words from our sponsors. You're listening to The Left versus the Right here on 77 WABC with the one and only Jake Novak. Just remember that name. You're going to hear that name over and over, not only on this station, but all around the world. And then a guy named David Paterson who woke up one day as a human being and later that day became governor.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Left versus the Right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back for our final segment of The Left versus the Right. Jake Novak with David Paterson. And in the news these days, a very wealthy woman who doesn't think other people who should be wealthy. And her initials are AOC. Take it away.
Yeah. So this week, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is being interviewed. And she makes the interesting statement that you can't earn $1 billion. Emphasis on the word earn. Obviously, we have a lot of billionaires in the world. By the way, we just found out late last week that Elon Musk earned $158 billion just from Tesla alone in 2025. She said you can't earn $1 billion. The point being, and she didn't do a great job explaining her point because she's still not articulate enough, but for her own good. But she basically making the point that's too much money for one person to actually pocket themselves. There's too many other people who play a role in the creation of all that much wealth, and it shouldn't be concentrated in even $1 billion, even though we have now almost trillionaires in the world. Even $1 billion is too much to concentrate in that pocket. And I'm listening to her speak, and I know that she's the name on the TV screen as she's speaking or on your phone. But the voice coming out of her mouth was a voice was very familiar. It should be familiar to you too, even though it's very, very old. Unfortunately, it's still very, very strong. The voice coming out of her mouth was the voice of Cain right before he went to kill his brother. The resentment politics of communism, which is really what communism promotes, resentment. Because communists, I don't think they're stupid. They know that if their system is imposed, there will be more widespread poverty and misery for everyone. But that's what resentful people do. If I can't have you, you can't have it either, and we'll just burn the whole thing down. And then the aftermath is that everyone lives among the ashes. That's communism. Communism is very much a Cain-inspired movement. And her resentment, the resentment against these people that we see either with this whole Ken Griffin situation here in New York City, It's resentment. It's not jealousy, and it sure as heck isn't economic justice. And because, and I make the point of separating jealousy from resentment because I long believed that I don't like jealousy. I experienced jealousy recently for the first time since I was in high school, and I didn't miss it. Nevertheless, jealousy can lead to a positive outcome. If someone is really jealous of the wealth and the success that someone else has, if they don't go down the path of resentment, they may try to emulate it, and that could be a good thing. But resentment is all bad all the time. It's literally that's the person who burns down the house that he wishes he had and just decides that no one should have it. That's the person who goes and kills a successful person. And resentment leads to violence every single time.
Yeah, and when she first started, some of these things she said sounded kind of way out and that kind of thing. But her personal presentation, she smiled. Mm-hmm. She would talk about different things. She'd crack jokes a little bit. But now she is completely taken over, her brain and everything else, by this idea that everything has to be completely even between everybody. And the funny thing is, if somebody, from another planet, and a matter of fact, we may be talking to some people from other planets because the White House has opened up the UFO documents, but somebody came down here and split us all up, gave us all the same amount of money. I predict in 10 years, the same people who are running the show now will be running it then. Yep. And the rest of us will be, in a secondary category. And some people won't have very much because they illogically blew all the resources that they had. And while it's a little bit humorous, it's actually true that a lot of people who think they're in such a bad situation because of the government, they're in a bad situation because they didn't do anything about their situation after high school or college or whenever. And I think that's really where she's running into, I think, some opposition that's going to expose her.
Well, she represents a group of voters in this country or potential voters that I don't know if it's growing, because I do think that we started to put a cap on these kinds of people. But here's someone who went to Boston University, which is one of the most expensive private colleges in the country, extremely expensive BU, very. And she was still working as a bartender several years out of graduation. And there are a lot of people in those types of situations who, instead of putting the onus on themselves or rethinking what they should do instead, they've decided that people who are successful are to blame. And again, it's resentment. It's not like, well, I had a friend who went to state school or community college, and they've got a job, and they don't have these debts, the student loan debt, and things like that. Maybe I should go that route, or at least help, or at least maybe speak as an example, and go out and talk about how don't make the mistake I made. Instead, let's just bash the successful people. It's one, again, and I see this in journalism too. What excites me in my years in the news media is when I see a success story, and I like to be able to get people excited about it. So many of my colleagues see a success story, and they feel that it's their job to find out what's wrong with it. We had an incredible exchange with it was Larry Ellison, who was defending Elon Musk a few weeks ago. And there was a journalist saying, well, there's this, that, and the other thing. And Ellison was saying, well, what have you done? Elon's done this, and this, which has added tremendous wealth and tremendous betterments of our lives in a number of different areas. And who are you? You're some journal. You're going to say it's not good? I mean, this is Cain. Cain is a very, very powerful figure. I'm coming from a tradition that doesn't make a big deal about Satan, so I don't talk about satanic stuff that much. That's why I can watch all those scary exorcism movies and they don't frighten me. But we don't need Satan. We had people who were at least purported to be real human beings who are completely responsible for everything. And this voice of resentment coming out of AOC's mouth, I sometimes I really feel like going to these people and say, like, who do you think you're talking to? Don't you know I know who you are? Don't you know I know that voice? Don't you know there are millions like me who know that voice too? It's nothing new to us. I've heard this before, and I know how it ends. And I'd love to be able to educate as many people about that as possible. And I don't say we need to go to war with anyone. I don't go to sleep at night angry about the Democrats like so many people do about Trump supporters, and I feel sorry for them. But I certainly do think about their ideas, and I do worry about those ideas a lot.
I go to sleep angry at least 4 times a week, and it's about the Mets.
Yeah, me too.
But, you know, what's interesting is that our religious institutions, as I see it, over the years, have softened the kind of way that they would basically, demand that people in the congregation think exactly in the same way and do everything exactly the way it's written in the Bible. And some of the things that are suggested weren't even in the Bible. But at a certain point, that type of education, as I see it, is now more important than the public education because they are trying to sell, and I'm just using the word sell, but they are trying to get people to think about what type of people they are. Would you help your neighbor if your neighbor had something wrong with them? Would you go the extra yard to try to do something for members of your family that aren't doing as well? That is a whole lot better than what the political decisions are, which is how to get your opponent in trouble, how to hate anybody who's doing better than you, and how to try to bring down people who represent any type of hope or excitement. And I think because of that, we have fewer well-known people who carry that banner, where even people that don't completely agree with them think, wow, but they think, they care, and I'm not going to try to put them down.
Yeah, and how to make your words be more valuable than your actions. I mean, we are living in a political world where words are valued more than actual actions. And this, of course, has a lot to do with the news media backing this up and allowing this to happen. But you said something really, really important just then about how this kind of religious education focuses on more of what kind of a person you want to be. And I want to talk to everyone out there who's not very religious, doesn't believe that the Bible is divine. I got a news for you. That's fine. That's totally fine. You don't have to believe that the Bible is the exact word of God to realize, and hopefully you still realize, that the Bible includes a tremendous amount of wisdom about human nature. Every type of human character and what they do in different situations is basically depicted in the Bible. And it's amazing how predictive it is. I mean, I see, for example, behaviors online on social media, which remind me of particular biblical stories. King Saul is a Facebook virtue signaler, for example. He's basically a butcher and becomes king of Israel because they needed a butcher at that time to kill off the Philistines and all the other people who were massacring the Jews constantly. And then he wants to go legit. He wants to be Mr. Moral leader of the world. And so he doesn't listen to God's commandments about doing the killing he's supposed to do. And the first thing he does is build a monument to himself. He's a Facebook. I mean, seriously, I see King Saul on Facebook like all the time.
Right.
So, and I've talked about Cain as well. So you don't need to be a very religious person to see that there was a decent amount of human communal wisdom that went into the Bible. You don't need to believe in God. But if you don't see that, and this is why it's a shame. Also, I don't know how you learn art history without a biblical education.
Right.
I mean, what are you talking about? Who's Jesus? What's the shepherd? I mean, honestly, you really need to have the Bible as a core part of your education. It doesn't have to be taught as here's this divine word, and if you don't do it, you're going to go to hell. That I don't believe in. But anyway, I feel sad for people who don't have basic biblical knowledge. They should make it a regular category on Jeopardy just so more people will read up on it. It is a pretty regular character. I think they should just have it on at least once a week. By the way, I kill on those. Shakespeare and the Bible, when they're ever on Jeopardy, I run that category, no problem.
Oh, man.
So that's awesome. But honestly, and by the way, you can't understand Shakespeare all that well without knowing the Bible. So honestly, to me, the human nature aspects that I get, it's like every single story is like, oh yeah, that's like this one or that one. And then all I can ask myself is, boy, how many stories am I missing? Have I forgotten? Or am I not applying properly to what's going on right now? The Bible understands human nature, whether it's divine or not. If you're the biggest atheist out there listening, just remember that. There's nothing wrong with it. I won't report you to the Atheist Union. You can go ahead and read the Bible and enjoy it and all those things. And as we said in other times before, if politics have become your substitute religion, I feel sorry for you on many different levels, but especially because you're really missing out on some good food and music. There's just no good food and music in politics like there is in religion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they, you go to church. After the church, they have a luncheon. They have food there. There all kinds of ways to meet your neighbors and talk about how wonderful the Reverend's message was that day, and the whole thing. And I think that's really what has gotten lost over the years, where it existed before.
Well, people are starving for it, Governor. I mean, these people going to these No Kings rallies, they're trying to go to church. They're trying to go to synagogue. It's so clear to me.
Yeah.
It's so clear to me. And the people who paint their faces and go shirtless at a negative 20-degree football game, they're going to an old pagan ritual. That's really what they're doing. There's no such thing as a non-religious person. You're all doing something religious. Again, the most atheist person out there, I promise you also have a religious devotion to something. It may be to the Mets, and for that I'm really sorry. It may be to the Giants. It may be to Fish, or before that, the Grateful Dead. It may be to yourself. Narcissism is a very popular religion these days. It always has been. Or it may be to a particular political party. And then I really feel sorry for you, because that's a really poor substitute. Food, music aside, it's also really empty. And it's one of the reasons why I don't want to hear politics on the base level in my synagogue. And I certainly don't want to hear left-wing politics, but I got news for you. I don't want to hear right-wing politics or the Republican Party platform in my synagogues either. If you want to talk about overall morality, you want to talk about justice, and that's what I do want to hear. But I don't want to hear vote for this candidate, or I really like that policy, or this guy and that. I mean, the fact that people actually do that in churches and synagogues now, usually for the left, is beyond pathetic.
Well, the politics, the political feelings that people have really creeped into the churches all over the place, and it's really, you get to the point where you don't really know what you should do with yourself on the weekends.
Well, I always say, and this is why I don't like. I mean, I'll try to. I'll give one example on the left and the right. Okay. If I go to a synagogue and I'm hearing left-wing based politics, my answer usually is, if I wanted to hear the Democratic Party platform set to music, I'd go to a Joan Baez concert. If I went to a synagogue and I heard a bunch of, again, right-wing based issues of the day, specific issues, candidates of the day, I would say if I wanted to hear the right-wing platform, the Republican Party platform set to music, I'd go to a Ted Nugent concert. I don't need to do that and spend, and by the way, your average traditional Jewish service on Saturday is 3+ hours. It's long, man. So I could really save my time. And if I ever hear a rabbi saying vote for this candidate, or we want this tax, I mean, no, absolutely, it really cheapens my religion.
Well, I think that you have really imparted to us this afternoon, Jake, really where the spiritual tones are definitely part of our existence. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have a special guest here next week. I'm going to take next Saturday off. You will be on here from 3 to 4, and your guest will be Cain. Cain himself is coming back. What happened to Cain? Did he get prosecuted, or did he have a defense attorney?
He demanded God's protection, and he got it. He was absolutely entitled. As a criminal, it's like these criminals who demand good food and TV in jail. Cain was their patron saint too. Cain gets busted, and the first thing he says to God is, "What are you going to do for me? You're going to send me out? How? I mean, he expects protection. Again, communist, evil communist."
Hope you all enjoyed the show, and have a great rest of the day, Cain.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Listen to this podcast now
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.